How's it going? Thad Brown here with you today. It is the Endgame. You're watching Rochester First, and it is Thursday, November the 6th. Bills getting ready to take on the Dolphins. Don't hold your breath for much in the way of Miami Dolphins talk today. We won't get into that very much. I do have some more thoughts on the trade deadline, what Brandon Beane did, what he didn't do, what he said yesterday for sure. That will be a big part of today's show. We'll also talk a little bit about the legend that is Michael Hoyt. The amount of popularity that guy's got in the last few days is kind of incredible. We'll talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to be joined today by Dr. Kyle Trimble. Most of you out there better know him as the guy who is behind Banged Up Bills. He is the injury expert for most Bills coverage. We talked a lot about both Michael Hoyt and Ed Oliver, the recovery time for Ed Oliver, what's reasonable, what's likely. And then also we got into what his business is like. What is the state of the injury expert industry? The people who are out there covering injuries from afar, trying to explain to all of us who have 1.00046% of the medical knowledge that these doctors and people who are obviously certified and have the MDs, have the old diplomas on the wall. They're the ones who know about these injuries, but all of us here are trying to talk about them. So Dr. Kyle Trimble does a good job in terms of translating what's going on with Bill's injuries to something that us laymen can understand. So I talked to him for a little bit. We'll have that a little later on in the show as well. Let me start out here with what went down yesterday at One Bills Drive with Brandon Beane coming to the mic and talking about the trade deadline. And to Brandon Beane's credit, and I'll say it here and we say it all the time, he is never one to shy away from a microphone. He is never one to shy away from facing the music, from addressing what has happened, whether it be good or bad. He is open. He is honest, even frankly to a fault at times. So the things that he said yesterday, I appreciate the fact that he really came out there and wore it on his sleeve. And the number one impression I have from everything that went down with that press conference is that I can't ever remember Brandon Beane being more quiet, being more disappointed, or at least appearing disappointed. So he was just generally not as affable and up as he normally is. Affable is probably a wrong word. He was just as friendly as he usually is for a press conference. But there was clearly something that went down, something that happened, and we know what it is at the trade deadline. It was clear that the Bills did not do what Brandon Beane either expected or hoped, probably both. And here's the bottom line too. And I think you can figure that out through what Brandon Beane said, that the Bills did not get enough of the trade deadline. This roster is not where this team wants it to be. And I'm going to tell you all the reasons why. And this is something that I think. I think coming out of the trade deadline, I don't think this Bills team is good enough to win a Super Bowl. Doesn't mean it won't, but I don't think they have the pieces on the roster to get that done. They'll be good. They'll go to the playoffs. They'll probably even win playoff games. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is a Super Bowl winning team, not as currently constructed. And from the way Brandon Beane not only addressed the media in terms of reading between the lines, trying to understand what the thinking is behind what he had to say, just go by his words. And let me show you some of them now, because Brandon Beane was not afraid to talk about this team and the trade deadline in what I thought was a pretty darn open and honest way.
We had a couple of conversions with a couple of our guys to give us a little bit of money to possibly get a few more options once we realized some of them were out of play for us Monday due to our cap. We did not do those, but we had them ready to turn in. You are allowed to do that if we were able to consummate a deal. Unfortunately, it takes two to tango, and we tried on quite a few, and a lot was just, we're not moving them, and some was, we ran into, a couple teams in our division were trading and couldn't get a lot of interest there. Believe me, I went home as mad as any other fan, or as mad. Like, I wanted to do things. I'm always wanting to do things to make this team better.
Brandon Beane pretty much wearing his frustration on his sleeve there. It was not hard to figure out what he thought of what happened at the trade deadline and what he, I don't want to say his opinion of the team, because he did went on to say that he thinks the team can win, but he knows that what the Bills wanted to get done this week didn't happen. And he won't say it, but going through all the different things that he said yesterday and the way he said them, you can tell that he's disappointed the Bills didn't get more, that this was not what he had hoped to get. And I think the problem is not the trade deadline. This is not something that Brandon Beane failed on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The failure with this season, and failure is a strong word because this is still going to be a really good team and a really good roster. The problem with this team and what went wrong began weeks ago. This is not something that just became a problem over the last few days. It starts with the Bills assuming they didn't really need more help at wide receiver. You go back to the rant that Beane had about not needing receivers back with WGR Radio in Buffalo, about when they were talking about why the Bills didn't address receiver more during the draft or in the offseason, and Brandon Beane just fired back. And I understand that he feels strongly about his plan. So like I said before, the guy is open and honest. We appreciate that. But I think it's become pretty clear as the season's gone along that the Bills' lack of receiver help is a problem. The lack of pass catcher help is a problem. And just because it worked last year does not mean it was going to work as well again this year. So that to me is problem number one here. That the Bills went into this season thinking, well, everybody eats. That's something that we clearly made work. We can just do this anytime we want to. We can play this game with our offense, and we're still going to put up 30 a week. And the offense is still good, but through 8 games, there have been multiple occasions where the receiving help has been the primary problem, has been the issue. And the group they have is certainly, the worst part of this team right now. Just because the Bills got the results out of it in 1 year doesn't mean they were going to get them again this year. So relying on a receiver group that was filled with young players who have yet to really ascend and become productive, with veterans who have been cast-offs from other places, and believing that just because they had that 8-game run or whatever it was of 30 points in a row during the regular season last year, that it was going to be okay, was probably mistake number one. And a part of that, too, is expecting Keon Coleman to develop. You draft a guy that high, you believe in him. You feel like he can be a productive player. You're not going to just take one bad year that Coleman had and assume that's who he's going to be. So it's not unfair that the Bills expected a guy like Coleman to mature. And if you want to put Dalton Kincaid in this discussion too, you can, because he has gotten better this year. He has been more productive. But Kincaid by himself is not carrying this pass receiver group. He's a fine player, but he's not a guy that's going to dictate things, not going to change anything on his own. So the Bills don't have enough at receiver to really be an elite contender by itself. The other problem that Brandon Beane had was certainly less his fault. And that's what's happening in the defensive line injury-wise. During the offseason, we talked about it, how Brandon Beane's solution for improving the defensive line, for getting better when it comes to certainly getting after the quarterback, but also I think to a degree stopping the run. The Bills didn't spend a gob of money on a Milton Williams or some giant free agent. They didn't trade up for a high first-round pick. They went for quantity over quality. They spent not one high pick, but 3 picks in the top 4 rounds, the second, third, and fourth rounder. They didn't go out and sign one high-priced free agent. They signed 3. varying middle tier. Joey Bosa is probably upper middle tier free agent. The idea being, A, you're bringing all these bodies, somebody's got to be good. And B, from something you hear from the Bills all the time, competition is good for this team. Competition makes everybody better. So you bring in a whole bunch of guys on defensive line, it should raise the level of everyone's competition because there's no guarantee all these players are going to make the team. And the ones that are good will, force, in theory, the other players to improve, to work harder to catch up. And certainly, in theory, it makes some sense. At the end of the day, you need guys who have talent. And the Bills have found with Joey Bosa, they have a talented player who's been healthy, who's been really, really good. But outside of that, what the Bills have gotten from this defensive line is primarily injury. You've got three guys who are essentially out for the year in Ed Oliver, Michael Hoyt, and Dwayne Carter. You've got TJ Sanders, your highest drafted rookie, who's currently on injured reserve, who should be back at some point this year, but there's no real concrete timeline for that. So the whole idea of having quantity over quality kind of went out the window because your quantity keeps getting hurt. And this just happens in the NFL. It seems like almost every team will have one position group that is just beset by injury. The Chargers are doing it at offensive line, just off the top of my head. For the Bills, it's been the defensive line. But, when these injuries started happening, the obvious move would be to come in and find some help. Fortunately for the Bills, they had Jordan Phillips in on the practice squad early in the year because they had two of the guys suspended. Remember, Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi obviously didn't play the first 6 games of the year due to their suspensions. So probably a little blessing in disguise that the Bills had to cover up for those 2 suspensions by bringing Jordan Phillips in for the practice squad just to make sure if something else happened, they'd have somebody around. Well, now Jordan Phillips is here. He's on the active roster. Actually played pretty good. Was a big part of that goal line stand at the end of the first half. Got 2 big stops. So maybe without Jordan Phillips being on the team, the Bills might be in even worse shape. But the whole idea of going quantity over quality at the D line was a very reasonable strategy. And it hasn't worked because guys keep getting hurt. So now the Bills are left with a solid group of defensive ends, led by Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa, but not extensively deep, because after that, you've got A.J. Epinesa and then Javon Solomon, who's frankly been more effective this year as a pass rusher from the defensive tackle spot than anything he's done at defensive end. So really, you have kind of 3 3/4 DNs as your depth chart. At tackle, at some point, Daquan Jones will come back, and he did actually practice today. We don't know if it's limited or full. We'll find out later. So that's getting better. TJ Sanders will be back. Deon Walker has been here all year. He's been by far the bright spot of the young guys. And frankly, when you look at the season all of the defensive tackles had so far this year, including guys who've been hurt, Deon Walker's had the best season without question. So that's your bright spot. You got Daquan Jones. Larry Ogunjobi's fine. He's probably a jag, just a guy. But what you're left with at defensive tackle, and in particular, and probably the defensive line as a whole, is not nearly what the Bills had hoped for. And unless Joey Bosa is going to be really dominant in the playoffs, it's hard to really argue this defensive line is going to be any more impactful than it's been the last few years, when the defensive line is generally one of the things you point to and say, if only the Bills had more. So now that the Bills are through the trade deadline, and we know who the team is primarily going to be. And Brandon Mead did talk on Wednesday about how the Bills still could add more. And certainly, you get a guy who gets cut somewhere else. Maybe he can come in and help you. The Bills grabbed Jordan Phillips that way last year. It's not likely that you get a big impact out of there, but it's not impossible. But we know primarily what the group is going to be. So what's the most likely outcome for this Bills team? Well, I think the most likely outcome is that you get into January deep, and the Bills' offensive fastball is the run game. It's James Cook, it's the offensive line. They're excellent. Both guys, both Cook and the 5 guys up front. The problem is run games don't carry you deep into January much anymore. This isn't 1983. This isn't Jim Brown football anymore. And to that point, of the last 15 Super Bowl champs, only 5 ranked higher in the league in terms of rushing yards than passing yards. And of the last 6 Super Bowl champs, only last year with the Eagles did a team rank higher in terms of rushing yards as opposed to passing yards. When I mean ranking, I don't mean raw yards. Teams are obviously stacked 1 through 32 based on total yards. Last year, the Eagles had a higher ranking for total rush yards than they did total pass yards. The 5 Super Bowl champs before that, all were the other way around. And of those, you talk about 5 of the last 15, most of them obviously go back to 2018 and earlier. So recent history says the team that wins the Super Bowl is probably going to be a stronger passing team. And this Bills team will not be that. So when you get to the postseason, the Bills will be trying to rely on their run game and then hoping Josh Allen can fix the rest. And Josh Allen is ridiculously talented, so you cannot dismiss that. But it is not the ideal scenario. Even the Eagles last year, being a team that had a higher ranking running the ball than passing the ball, they still had A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith to catch passes. Both of those guys would be godsends for this Bills receiving corps. Even Dallas Goedert, frankly, would be a help to what the Bills have right now. So although the Eagles were a run primary team, you still had the weapons to make the passing game work when you needed to. And then on the flip side, when you look at what this Bills team will likely be in the postseason, there isn't enough of a pass rush for the Bills to just be overwhelming with the front 4. If you put Ed Oliver on this team, with the way Joey Bosa is playing and Greg Rousseau on the other side, there is an argument this pass rush might be that good. Deion Walker contributes a little bit. Jordan Phillips has been effective in spots. I could see even Michael Hoyt, for that matter, as a guy who's a good pocket pusher. I could see an argument that the Bills' defense could be carried by what the front 4 group, what the defensive line can do. But without Hoyt, without Oliver, there's still talent there. There's still a threat there, certainly Bosa being that guy. But it's not enough to create a defense that's going to be so overwhelming in the postseason that you can get past all of these elite offenses that get deep into the playoffs. And then you're going to have a secondary to where, there's, again, talent there. Everybody likes the way Cole Bishop played against the Chiefs. It was phenomenal. Max Hairston's looked good in his first couple games. But you're now counting on these guys to be some of the pillars of your secondary. Taylor Rapp is on injured reserve. He's not coming back this year. So you've got one safety spot that's already going to be either Jordan Poyer or Jordan Hancock for the rest of the year. So Jordan Poyer, a guy in the very back end of his career, I think he's played well, but certainly not anywhere close to his prime. Jordan Hancock, a guy who's not only brand new to the NFL, but converting positions. And that's going to be one of your safeties for the rest of the season. The other safety is Cole Bishop, who looked great against the Chiefs, but he's got more bad games than good games so far. You need Cole Bishop to stack more positive results, more production, before you look at that guy and say, we're good there. You've got a brand new rookie at one corner, Max Hairston, who again has looked good early, but he's only played 50% of snaps the first 2 games. So the Bills aren't even relying on him yet. Christian Benford's fine at the other corner. But then on top of that, your linebackers and your nickel corner, Taron Johnson, have all underperformed this year for them. I think Taron Johnson's been good, but I think he's been better in previous years. Terrell Bernard is not having a good year. Matt Milano cannot stay healthy. There is too much of that back 7 for me to look at it and say that's going to be fine come January. And without Ed Oliver, without Michael Hoyt, it's hard to look at that front 4 and say they're going to be so dominating that whatever problems you have behind them will be erased, will be covered up. And this is assuming Joey Bosa continues to stay healthy. He's got a wrist issue now. Practiced today, so I think in general he looks fine. But this has been the guy who you thought going into the year would be least likely to stay healthy. And good for the Bills and good for Bosa, he stayed healthy this long. But we're only halfway through the season. Are you going to really count on that to stay that way through the end of the year? So this roster top to bottom, I just don't think they have enough. When you get to the postseason, you almost have to have one part of your team that's so good, it's going to succeed in any circumstance. And once again, The only thing the Bills really have that fits into that category is named Josh Allen. And we have seen year after year after year what happens with that roster composition. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not a guarantee that it's a guarantee the Bills won't go to the Super Bowl. Number one, I can be wrong. I'm just one dude on a microphone, right? But more importantly, number two, the Bills do have at least what appears to be a plan for improving this roster without adding new players. And I think it centers around the young guys on defense. When you talk about, like I said, Cole Bishop and Max Hairston and Deion Walker, and I think to a lesser extent, TJ Sanders. Jordan Phillips was pretty impassioned yesterday about how he thinks the Bills are going to get a whole different type of TJ Sanders when he comes back from his injury. This is how you create a Super Bowl team without adding new players. You got to get better on your own. And with all these young guys on the field, and you can probably throw Jordan Hancock into this discussion as well, maybe even Dalton Kincaid for that matter. If these guys all play at a significantly higher level than they're playing at now, then we can start talking about a Bills team that would have enough to be a true Super Bowl winner. Not contender. They're going to contend just because you've got the run game and Josh Allen and you've got some pieces on defense. They're going to contend. But Bills fans have seen contending for 100 years. They want to see winning. And for that to happen, a number of pieces have to get better. And the guys who are most likely to get better are the guys who are young with upside, who we haven't seen all that they can be in this league. Joey Bosa is great. We know what he's going to be. Greg Rousseau is pretty good. We know what he's going to be. The linebackers, Taron Johnson. Even on offense, the offensive line, all really good. Maybe not all. Like I said, Terrell Bernard has not had a great year. But we know what they're going to be. Max Hairston, Cole Bishop, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders, they could be a lot better. They still have a whole lot of room for improvement. And if the Bills do get Cole Bishop, let's say he plays at that Chiefs level the rest of the year. Let's say Max Hairston doesn't have to be a shutdown corner. He's corner two, remember. The Bills got Christian Benford to be the shutdown guy. Let's say Max Hairston makes a few plays, a couple more interceptions, is a threat. Make sure that at the very least that other receiver on the field is not doing whatever he wants to. Say Jordan Hancock handles the safety position. He's going to make mistakes. He already has. But if it's only a few here and there, now we're talking about a secondary that maybe isn't a true dominant group in the NFL, but certainly won't get you beat and can make enough good plays to get you through the postseason. What if Deion Walker continues to get better? What if he improves a little bit as a run defender? Because he's got 7 tackles for a loss, which is top 15 in the NFL right now. But when he's not making a TFL, too often he's getting pushed around. If he can take those negative plays and clean them up, now you've got one of the better nose tackles in the league and a guy with some pass rushing juice. If TJ Sanders comes off injured reserve, just like Jordan Phillips says, and can suddenly be a legit threat as a pass rusher, well, you don't make up for it, Oliver, but now at least you're forcing teams to be honest while they're dealing with Rousseau and Bosa on the outside. This team can get better. This team can move themselves into a position where they're more of a threat to get to and win a Super Bowl. I mean, I think the most exciting thing about the second half of the season, if you're a Bills fan, is that this secondary in large part is not a finished product. Sean McDermott is still figuring out how to fit the pieces together. He moved a lot of things around against the Chiefs. You saw Cole Bishop playing nickel, dropped Cam Lewis to safety. They mixed and matched, like I said, Jordan Poyer and Jordan Hancock. So the product of the secondary that the Bills put on the field in January might not only look a lot different than what we've seen them be in the previous Januaries, but they could in theory be a lot better. There's more athleticism at the least with Cole Bishop and Max Hairston. So that's where the Bills are going to draw their hope. That's how they're going to sell the fan base. Not overtly, but if I'm talking about how the Bills win the Super Bowl, it's about all these guys primarily on defense getting better, becoming consistent, and at some level becoming an actual threat. I think Deion Walker and Cole Bishop has shown you enough already to where you can look at them and say, I wouldn't be stunned if we got to January and teams are talking about, we got to worry about 96. We can't let 24 make plays on us all day. And the other part of this game plan for the Bills in terms of how do you get this team to be a champion is that the AFC really isn't that good right now. Who is the real threat? I'd probably say the Chiefs. Well, the Bills just beat that team, and it wasn't lucky, and it wasn't all that close. Outside of that, who else are we talking about that's really a worry in the AFC, a big-time worry? In the Ravens, even if they figure out their regular season, which I think is very possible, their schedule's easy, but even if they do get to the playoffs, no team has more of a confidence problem when it comes to winning in January. Daniel Jones, Bo Nix. Are you really worried all that much about teams quarterbacked by either of those two guys, no matter how good the pieces are around those two? The Chargers, who are going to pretty much play what feels like an entirely backup offensive line the rest of the year. And really, too, at the end of the day, the playoffs are just 3 games. It sounds simple, especially in a world of we're going to build a narrative about how this team is clutch, this team is a champion, this team can't figure it out in the playoffs, this team always melts down. Really what it is you play 3 games in January. And if you show up and be the better team on those 3 days, you can go to and/or win a Super Bowl. It doesn't have to be this team has a indomitable coach that can't be figured out. This team has a quarterback or a passing game or a pass rush that no one can stop. Sometimes it's simply about, on this one day, can I outthink you? Can I make just a couple more plays? Can I get the ball to bounce my way? There are many, many Super Bowl champions who were unexpected because whether the matchups fell their way or they got a call or they got a bounce, the Joe Flacco Ravens always come to mind with this. I know that it's not exciting for me to sit here and sell you as a Bills fan and say one of your best shots is to get lucky, but it does happen. And the Bills will be there, and they will give themselves an opportunity, if the luck does bounce their way for once, to take advantage of it. But the problem for the Bills this year was not what happened this week at the trade deadline. It wasn't Brandon Beane failing to add someone at the very last minute. And he tried too. You could tell from the way he talked about it, the disappointment that was dripping off his face, that he made every effort to improve this roster this week. The problem for the Bills is that this roster on offense, when it comes to the passing game, was flawed from the beginning, perhaps impacted by a little bit of arrogance on the Bills' behalf. Not totally undeserved, but arrogance nonetheless. And it was flawed on defense because the Bills got an unusual rash of bad luck at the one position they really poured a ton of resources in to improve. And all of that was set in motion long before we got to Tuesday's trade deadline. And what Brandon Beane failed to do on Tuesday was kind of fix the problem at the end. He failed to save it. But those holes had been there for weeks before. And like I said, it doesn't mean that the Bills are done. It doesn't mean that a championship's impossible. But it just means that the Bills are going to probably be trying to do it the hard way, the unlikely way, the way they've been doing it the last few years. All right, when we come back, conversation with Dr. Kyle Trimble, Banged Up Bills. You'll love that. A lot of good stuff. We'll also talk a little bit about the legend that is Michael Hoyt. That's when we come back. You're watching the Endgame. My name is Thad Brown. Thad Brown back with you on the Endgame Thursday, November the 6th. Bills getting ready to take on the Dolphins. Like we said, not going to talk much Dolphins today. One thing I do want to get into here real quick. Michael Hoyt, the guy obviously, unfortunately, tears his Achilles against the Chiefs on Sunday. The Bills posted everywhere whatever social media feed you want to look to, you can find it. They had Michael Hoyt mic'd up for that game. So when he comes out, you can see him asking for help to get off the field, talking with the trainers about it. And then, as everybody knows now, he did not want to come off the field. He wanted to stay on the field and watch the game. And then the back minute and 15 of the video is just Hoyt over and over cheering for what's going on in the game, cheering when Max Harrison has his interception, cheering a James Cook run, telling all of his guys one after another, go win this one, go win this one, go win this one. And Bills fans love it. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's just the absolute sort of inspiring football attitude that so many football fans just love to see. So Bills fans have loved it. And Michael Hoyt now, after playing like a game in 3 quarters, is now one of the heroes of Western New York. And I love it. It's great for him. He's such a good dude. Everything that you saw in that video, from what I've seen of him, is authentic. This is just really how he is. This is not him putting on an act. This is not him being up for a game. He is just a genuine, loves football, loves promoting everyone around him, positive thinker. And it's super fun to see. It's unfortunate that the Bills, won't be able to use him much. I mean, really, the sad part about this injury and what's happened with Hoyt is that after getting the PD suspension, he misses the first 6 games. Then he plays a game and change, more or less. And now he's going to miss the rest of this year. This injury is for sure going to impact next year. More likely than not, he'll start the season on PUP and miss a few games to begin next year. Even when he does come back next year, we've known from Achilles and major leg injuries that next season is not nearly anywhere close to 100%. By the time Michael Hoyt has an opportunity to play a full, complete, healthy season, he'll be 30 years old. And on the back end, the final year of a 3-year contract. So it's kind of like, you don't want to make light of the situation at all. It is kind of funny that the guy might have a game and a half of contributions to playing for the Bills, and Bills fans have already fallen in love with him. Deservedly so, because of his attitude and the way he carries himself, and you saw it in that video. But in terms of actual production on the field, the Bills might not get a whole lot out of Michael Hoyt this year. All right, like I said, I sat down a little bit earlier this week with Dr. Kyle Trimble. He is Banged Up Bills, got his own website, all over social media. Does a great job of informing all of us out there what all of these injuries mean, how long guys are going to be out. His articles are fantastic, so much detail. So I talked with him about Michael Hoyt, about Ed Oliver, and about the industry as a whole. What is it like to be an injury expert? Here's that conversation with Dr. Kyle Trimble. So, Kyle, the big injury for the Bills, the more recent one, is Michael Hoyt and the Achilles injury. And look, I don't think there's any doubt about rehab time or any of that stuff, but I found it interesting. He stayed on the field, even though there was a cart brought out for him. What was it like for him to be on the field physically with a torn Achilles? How hard was it to, I guess, endure that while the rest of the game was happening?
It had to be incredibly difficult to realize what happened in the moment and still keep trying to move forward there. It's incredible that he still was trying to drive forward to finish the play because he knew that he could still provide pressure. So I think it's just adrenaline going at that point because he lost the function to push the foot down and drive himself forward there. So we saw him rupture the Achilles, hop, and then realize, hey, I still got to try to keep moving, and then did what he did there. So I think that's just the adrenaline going, and then just the fact that he knew he had a job to go finish, and then he could, get the training staff to come out and take a look at him there. So I've suffered injuries on the field for different reasons, and I know that as soon as that happened, you shut down. It's like, holy cow, what happened? Or sometimes you're in shock there. But these guys are just built differently. It's impressive that he's able to finish that rep despite tearing his Achilles.
And like I said, not just finishing the rep, but then staying on the field. Is that the kind of injury that you are going to be in some pain? In other words, how heroic, for lack of a better term, was it that he was a guy who demanded to remain on the bench and stay with his team? Like, I'll put it this way. I've been in locker rooms for 20-some years. This is the first time I can ever remember a player who clearly suffered a season-ending injury basically getting dressed with the rest of his teammates, not as easily, obviously, in the locker room afterward. It just kind of surprised me how much he just kind of went about the rest of the game normally despite having a torn Achilles.
Exactly. If it's a fully torn tear, there's actually little or no pain. I mean, the pain eventually sets in later on, but you just don't have that function there anymore. So it's like, not saying he can sit there and, I don't have any problems with all, but like when you have a full tear like that, there's not really anything with that. It's just weak. You don't have any function, and then there's not a lot of pain with that. So he's like, well, this is an emergency situation. I'm going to sit and cheer on my friends. And then you saw him with the boot and the crutches later on, and you have to adjust how you're doing things there. But this isn't a situation where you have to go to the hospital and get it repaired immediately. Like I assume he had done today or maybe well, actually Monday or maybe Tuesday. But the fact that it's like it's not an emergency situation, so might as well just enjoy the rest of the game and cheer on your teammates. So I maybe it's heroic in some respects, but the fact that he just wants to be out there and enjoy the moment rather than getting whisked back in there for something he already knew, I appreciate that he was living in the moment at that time.
Let's move on to the other recent major injury for the Bills. That would be Ed Oliver's torn bicep. Real quick, I think a torn bicep sounds obvious, but unlike an Achilles, which is one tendon more or less and it's done, what is kind of the nature of a torn bicep and what it would, I guess, look like described best medically?
So it happens torn bicep. You can tear it at both the proximal area up toward the shoulder or down the distal area, which is where Ed Oliver tore at, right down near the elbow. And we saw him go through the line. His left arm got caught behind him, and then he fell down and immediately grabbed the inside top portion of the elbow. And really what happens is the bicep gets lengthened under tension, that eccentric contraction, and the stress was so great on the muscle, it just tore at the anchor point. And that's unfortunately common. We saw that with Matt Milano. We've seen that with plenty of other guys over the years. And it's a pretty straightforward thing. I mean, if you tear at the proximal area, there's two heads of the bicep that attach to the shoulder, and you can still play through the stuff. You just have some weakness. But if you tear the distal part, there's no way coming around it because there's only one attachment. It's a pretty straightforward surgery. You just go repair and attach the tendon back to the bone there. But same thing we saw with Michael Hoyt. You lose the function. I think he did see his move the arm once or twice, but like there are other musculature that can help assist with that. But obviously it's a lot weaker, and it's just unfortunate that when he went through, you could either think, hey, this could be shoulder, it could be pectoral. It just happened to be the bicep that took all the strain that time, and it went. But there wasn't any previous known injuries to the area that would have led to this either.
Now, originally, and I kind of did my own research, you talked about the Matt Milano injury, and that was about 3.5 months between when the injury happened and when he returned. So that would put, if you use the same timeline, that would put Oliver his return just after the Super Bowl. There was a recent report, Ian Rappaport I think had it, that Oliver could be back for the start of the playoffs, or maybe week 2 of the playoffs. Why, in your opinion, is that a very aggressive timeline for this type of injury?
Because you have to let the tendon heal back to the bone, and that takes 4 or 6 weeks, somewhere in that range there. Because I mean, like that's the whole basis behind the muscles. The tendon connects the muscle to the bone, and you have to let that heal back down. Even if it's a partial tear, you still have to let the healing happen. You can't speed that up to, like, you can do things to maximize the rehab, but you can't speed up the healing time at that point to make it from a month recovery to 2 weeks or whatever. Like at least they haven't found out how to do that easily. So you're looking at a month there, and then you're looking at, you have to build that strength back up. Even though he was strong there before, you still have to restart the whole process and build yourself back up. Let's say you do strengthening for another month there. That's fine. That's maybe for you and me, that's good to go. I've rehabbed bicep tears before. They do well and they do bounce back, but there's a difference between strength to hold a TV camera or just doing regular stuff, or anything that your day-to-day activities, versus trying to throw around NFL linemen. So you need the extra time to build yourself back up even more, and then you have to build that function back up. It's not even just bending the elbow, it's rotating your hand, because that works with that supination pronation aspect of your hand when you rotate your hand up and down, palm up, palm down, and then that does affect your grip strength to some extent there too. So there's just a lot more to it, and it's not an easy timeline to just kind of say, hey, we're at this time frame, you're going to be absolutely doing this. I mean, there's can be setbacks, there can be a slower recovery time, and a number of different things that can happen. So because of rehab Matt Milano, there's a chance they could probably skip a few steps. They probably use blood flow restriction and some other different ways to kind of work around the muscle area to kind of build himself back more quicker. But you're taking a rehab timeline that was already aggressive with Matt Milano and trying to shave off even more time. At some point, you have to get the function back, but you can't rush it too quickly because the body still needs to heal up there. So I know he returned to practice. I mean, he tore in Matt Milano specifically. If he tore in mid-August, he returned to practice in mid-November. He had about, the 2 or 3 weeks to fully get up to speed there. Maybe he can come back and they say, hey, you're good enough, get back out there and go. And then he doesn't need that extra ramp up time like we saw with Matt Milano. that's where maybe you shave some time off. But once again, it's still aggressive timeline because you're hoping that everything goes well, that there's no setbacks, and that he regains function as expected.
So I think your initial, I believe I read that you thought that there was a chance the AFC Championship might be the most optimistic point that Oliver could come back.
More or less, yeah. Yeah, because I thought that the wild card weekend was like, that's 10 weeks. That's really pushing. That's saying everything's way, way ahead. And that's like, the surgeon's really happy with everything. And then if you get the bye week and get the divisional round, okay, that's even better. AFC Championship game would be ideal. And we do know the team is willing to push the envelope with this stuff. We saw that Micah Hyde when he was trying to turn from his neck injury. We saw Matt Milano last year, like Daquan Jones. Like, they're willing to do this stuff, but it has to be everybody on board regarding the player, the player, the surgeon, the rehab team. Like, you can't just say I want to return. I think Ed Oliver just say he's going to be back in a month, which we know is not physically possible. So sometimes these guys have to be protective from themselves, but they also have to make sure that they are going to be functionally fine, because we do see where guys return too soon and then tear it out again. Best example would be Brandon Graham last year in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Now, he returned because he's an older player, maybe his last chance to play. He tears his triceps again. And it's like, okay, fine. You were playing in the Super Bowl. You won. Granted, he's back this year, but still, like, that's the risk you do when you do return too soon. You can rip it out because it's simply not strong enough. So, going back to where it said, it's aggressive timeline because you can only shave so much time off without risking the surgical repair.
Let's talk about the job you're doing here as a injury expert, something that it feels like an industry that's growing a little bit, certainly around social media and around the NFL. How did you get involved in doing this in the first place? And actually, before we get there, give me a little bit about your medical background. I know you're a physical therapist, but in terms of specifically the type of medicine you've been practicing and kind of how you got into your normal career, your day job, more or less, before we discuss the social media part.
All right, so I have to go back a little bit here. So, go back. I graduated high school in 2006. Went to D'Youville College in Buffalo, now D'Youville University. Spent 7 years there to get my doctorate in physical therapy. Graduated in 2013. Moved back home for a few years down in Erie. Then came back up to Buffalo. Met my wife, family, whole 9 yards, and everything. So I started working in a bunch of different settings, starting off in nursing home care, and then moved to outpatient orthopedics, and then did some hospital work. Telemedicine stuff. I've kind of done a little bit of everything there, but then I've settled in home health, which is a pretty good gig right now, and I see a lot of everything. So that kind of sets the foundation for what I do as a PT, and I've seen plenty of different things and things that you don't learn in school, obviously, being in the career as long as I have been, 12 years now. So going into what I do from an engine analysis thing, this all started was I reached out to a local podcast, Rock Power Report, and they were talking about injuries. I said, hey, I'm a physical therapist. I know about this stuff. Had me on the podcast 2016, and I played with the idea for a little bit, thinking, whatever. Is there a need for this stuff? And I kind of realized that the coverage wasn't detailed enough, and it wasn't anything against any of the beat reporters, but like, you guys have your knowledge in the game and what to report on, and there was that extra layer that just wasn't being addressed, and that really wasn't being addressed anywhere, like whether any different market there. So I reached out to a few outlets, kind of got the cold shoulder, and I said, heck with it, I'm going to start my own thing. So that's how Banged Up Bills came up, and I thought I'd come up with a better name, and I didn't. So it just kind of kept growing from there. I keep writing, meet my buddies at Cover One, and then I've done work with Buffalo Rumblings, and done some betting work, a lot of fantasy football with Dynasty League Fantasy. I've been just kind of bouncing around doing different freelance work, and it just, from that, it's led to more opportunities, meet more people, and that's probably the best part about it. It's like, yeah, I have a outlet for what I do from a physical therapist and being Bills fan, but then just the opportunities I've met people and done different things. I'm like, if I didn't put myself out there like that, I'm not doing any of this stuff later on. And I know that there's more opportunities later that could lead to other things there. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. But the site does great. I mean, people really appreciate what I do. I mean, I'm not right all the time. I know I can't be, but really I want to provide a understanding what the injury is, why things take the way the timelines they do, and then the fact that these injuries are complex. I mean, I think sometimes people see these guys as superheroes, or that, well, they just bounce back, or they're not tough enough. It's like, listen, if you guys understood what these guys actually play through that's not reported or underreported, most people aren't playing through that stuff. And it's incredible how these guys just shrug it off as, okay, get back on the field and do what they got to do there. So I try to shed light into what these guys are dealing with and what they could be dealing with and why they're playing like they're doing, or why they are. And I haven't had any mean DMs from any players. The Bills haven't tried to take me out. I mean, it seems like I'm fitting a need there. And you see, like you mentioned before, the industry growing so much from a gambler's perspective, from fantasy football, and then just people just want more information. The average NFL fan is certainly more engaged and informed, and they want to know about this stuff, good or bad, so they can cheer on their team appropriately and have better context as what they're looking at.
Banged up Bills, by the way, is perfect. Don't ever change it. It just rolls off the tongue so nicely.
Yep.
We all like alliteration in this world. With the industry, because you're not the only one doing this in the country. There are people like Dr. David Chow. I think that would be the number one name everybody knows about. But you're not even the only one who does this from a Buffalo Bills point of view, although you are far and away the best. That said, what is this industry like? What is your opinion on, A, how accurate it is, and B, how helpful this industry of social media medical experts has become, here in the year 2025?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of benefit to having people have their education and see what's like, to give context to everything. I think it's great from that standpoint, but then also you see where anybody with a medical background can impart their knowledge, and you have to kind of weed out who's really knowledgeable about it and who's maybe just putting their thoughts out there. Because I mean, we see a lot of people who do know what they're talking about, but sometimes don't have the context or have the deeper understanding of the injury history of guys there. Or you might see, oh yeah, that's what that is. Well, trust me, I'm a doctor. Well, why should I trust you? I mean, anybody could put doctor so-and-so in their name or whatever. And I mean, I hypothetically could have been that way there too, but you build it up through repeated exposure and saying this is what it is. I mean, I try to be transparent. This is why I feel it is. And you have to give respect to the players and just understanding what these guys are going through, like I said before. So I think just how you approach it there too. I mean, anybody can go out and say, that's torn ACL, he's out for the season, and then maybe it's an MCL sprain, and well, whatever, he got lucky. Like, I just think that how you portray what your knowledge is, and not trying to be a know-it-all or trying to be arrogant about your knowledge. Like, it's okay to be confident about what you're talking about, but I think there also be is a healthy respect to understanding what you're talking about, because how you convey that message really dictates whether people, not to say take you seriously, but how they're going to revisit you later on. Because if you say, hey, that's that injury, and then you're wrong and you're arrogant about it, people are going, I'm not going to pay attention to that guy. But if you say, hey, here's the possibilities, here's what it could be, and even if you're right or wrong, people are going to at least say, hey, I understand the process, I understand the respect, and then you start seeing the top, kind of rise to the top, the cream rising to the top, the analogy. So it's definitely a crowded market. I don't think that it's bad that more people want to get involved with it, but you also have to be diligent and consistent with the stuff. You can't just show up and just say, that's that injury, and then not say anything for another 3 months and then expect people to take you seriously too.
You've talked about in the last few minutes here two important parts of your job. Number one, the fact that you're more or less making medical diagnosis with someone that you're not next to or talking to or get direct information from. And then also the responsibility that you feel is important that goes with that. How hard is it to marry those two pieces? Because those are probably the two primary parts of how you make or create the content that you're creating right now.
The diagnosis thing, I can't really, I had to be hands-on to say this is, exactly what it is. So I think the wording plays a big part in it. Hey, this possibly could be this injury, or hey, this looks like this could be this. So it's the wording and the framing of it. And I guess you could say, hey, it's a liability thing. I don't know when he's going to come out and sue me and say, oh, you said this wrong on social media. Like, I don't think that has a lot of weight to it. But really, if you say things in such a way, people are going to take you seriously or not. So I think how you frame it is really important. And then you have to be mindful, like, the players see this, the family sees this. Like, I feel like there's a duty to respect what these guys are. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be wrong saying, hey, this is what I think it is. Like, there's plenty of people out there that analysts, whoever else, giving their opinion. I think as long as you frame it and give some respect to the player and the situation, I think they can at least understand where you're coming from, rather than just dumping on them. Oh, he's this or that. And like I've met players who know who I am, and I'm like, that's really cool that you understand that, and they weren't ready to punch me in the face there. I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right, that they don't hate it, and I haven't got any blowback from anything. Like I said, the Bills haven't tried taking me out at all, but like, I just think how you frame it, and whether the medical staff likes me or not, and not that I guess that matters, but I think just how you frame it and what you're trying to do really impacts more the message than trying to say I'm right all the time, or this is what it is, good or bad.
I know you have explained how responsible you try to be when it comes to the things that you post out there, in the social media world. How good a job do you think the industry as a whole do when it comes to that type of responsibility?
I think it's gotten better. I think people, the people that are in it consistently are getting better with it and understanding it. And then, of course, there's still some bad actors out there, or people who are overly confident about their abilities, and they'll just shrug it off. Oh, whatever. It doesn't make a big deal. It's like, well, no, it does. I mean, it's you don't want to pay a narrative about somebody you haven't met at all. Like, for example, Michael Hoyt. We know that he's come off as PED suspension. And there is a higher likelihood when you have a testosterone, like elevated testosterone, which he had. I don't want to go say, well, that's, he's on testosterone, that's why he tore his Achilles. Yes, there is a correlation there, but I can't assume that. I can't assume that that's what's going on. But I feel like some people would just want to make that connection and say, well, that's why it is. Well, maybe, but chances are, he had the mechanism for the injury to begin with there. So I can't assume that. And of course, that's going to paint him in maybe a negative light. And that's how narratives get formed, and it's amazing how those things can really run away there. So just being mindful of the person and understanding the full context of everything really kind of helps the consumer understand what is going on with the person, so that they can have a true view of everything rather than just one focused biased view.
This industry is young, like many in the many industries that are part of the social media content creating world right now. Where would you like to see it? Where do you think it can go? And maybe what things would you like to see either changed or improved? Or, I think when you have something early like this, the guardrails start pretty wide. And the further you go, the more you want to see those guardrails come together. Where do you think those guardrails need to be moved when it comes to the injury expert industry?
That's a really good question, because I know the first place to go to that with that is people want that, like they have the referees, when they went on TV explain the rules there. Like, that'd be great to have somebody have a injury analyst on the sideline, for whether it's on the sideline or whether up in the booth or whatever. And they'd be doing the same thing, but that's dicey because sometimes you're not getting all the information, or you not get the greatest angle. I would imagine the people in the booth probably have all the angles available to them that they need, because it's amazing where they can pull a camera from. It's like, I didn't even know you had a camera out that way. So that's probably the next step for that there. But then you have to be worried about, like, hey, am I going to put bad information out there? Because it's amazing how quickly that stuff can travel there, even the most intelligent people who've been on the sidelines. But I think you're going to just start seeing more. I don't think the NFL can regulate this per se, but I think you're going to just start seeing more bigger networks have their industry guy, and kind of like what Stephania Bell does to some extent. Like, she's not on the sideline talking about stuff, but you see how that works into fantasy there. So I hope that there's just more adaptation and more maybe I don't call it opportunities, because there are opportunities out there, but maybe bigger opportunities for people to maybe just full time, or make some more occupation, I guess. Like, my occupation is a physical therapist, but if I could do this full time, that'd be great. I could devote more time into research. I could devote more time into better understanding the injuries, and then maybe have more clear discussion from the injuries from the coaches. I know Sean McDermott's famous for not really giving us a whole lot. Bill Belichick was even worse. That's the prerogative not to give us a lot of information, but maybe have a more clear understanding. My one thing with that, there's a podcast I listened to by two former Kansas City athletic trainers. And they had talked about when Sean McDermott said that Daquan Jones had popped his calf. Well, they didn't like the phrasing of that, and he thought maybe one of the athletic trainers or physical therapists can come out and explain the injuries a little bit more, not giving too much detail away, but really having a better, deeper understanding how to explain things, because then that gets translated out to the consumers, the media. And because popping your calf thinks you tore it, well, he just strained it, and strained is a lot less concerning than popped. So even just having better understanding of the wording and phrasing, I think, really comes into that there. So it's definitely open-ended. I'd like to see where this goes more. It's probably going to get more gambling and fantasy related, but I think just having accurate information out there for people to consume will help make them better people in general, so they get better understanding of health. It's amazing how many people understand what a fracture and a break are. They're the same thing, or a strain or a sprain. It's like there's differences, and you have to understand that with understanding what is going on with the actual injury.
I think a medical spokesman for teams is a great idea. I think teams would balk at the idea of having another mouth that could potentially say something wrong. But I think this is a good idea potentially for the future. Dr. Kyle Dribble, thanks for joining me. Tell everybody at home where they can find your content.
You can find me at bangedupbills.com. You can find me on Locked On Bills every Friday with Joe Marino. You can find my work with fantasy football on dlffantasy.com. I do cover work for Cover One. I think that's everything. But if you're looking for Bills content, Bills injury content, banged up Bills, you're gonna find me on pretty much every social media platform.
Like I said, whenever there's an injury, this is the place I go to do my research. Kyle Trimble, thanks very much for joining me, man. Good talking with you.
Thank you, Thad.
One of the best parts about what Dr. Trimble does, and you heard it there, is how much he cares about being responsible, how careful he is, how much, not necessarily just the accuracy, but also, like he said, you don't want to put something out there that someone's family is going to see that for the sake of what he's trying to do, later turns out to be wrong. That man makes an effort every single time to the utmost to make sure what he's putting out there is responsible and correct and certainly helpful, but he does not overstate for the sake of engagement. He's trying to be right. He's trying to be accurate, and it is appreciated by me. And I'm sure if you follow him like I do, you'll appreciate it as well. All right, it's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Endgame. Back again on Monday. We'll talk Bills and Dolphins. Don't expect that to be a lengthy conversation, but we'll see. You never know. It's the NFL. Thank you very much to Dr. Kyle Trimble again for joining me. Thanks to you for watching. My name is Thad Brown. This is the Endgame. You are watching Rochester First. The kids, all the cool ones, the ones you tried to hang out with when you were a kid, they all call it Rock One. I'll see you on Monday.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 on demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.